points. I will come back to you, Mohan, but let's listen to Sonu. So what do you think, Sonu, have been the drivers or considerations for this kind of a shift? This kind of a... Yes,
yeah. Thank you, Ram. As part of my work now, and also when I was a banker, I've had the opportunity of interacting with a lot of the next gen. Now, as a matter of choice, and also as a banker, it just happened. One thing that stands out when I look at the interactions that I've had is that the next gen are the second generation or the third generation of families that made their money and their name in manufacturing, because as Mohan rightly pointed out, it was, pre-liberalization.
I think, Sonu, your screen is frozen.
It didn't matter. Yeah. Is this better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, please go on.
Okay, so like Mohan said, pre-liberalization, it didn't matter what you did, it mattered who you knew, because it all depended on getting the license to start manufacturing or doing a business. But as a result of which, people who could start work, say in the mid-90s and later, they all had the advantage of world-class education. And when they did come back, they found the way that Indian manufacturing was happening was not in line with the world manufacturing. And I'm talking of the mid-90s to late 90s. And then add to that the Y2K phenomenon that happened, that suddenly gave a fillip to a lot of the IT-led services. And it is my hypothesis that the focus on services started around that time, led by the whole hoo-ha around the IT-led services. It just suited the next gen. It suited their attitude. It suited their education to get into manufacturing. And this also gave them an opportunity not to tread on their father's toes and vice versa. Because one thing that the next gen are quite adamant about is that they do not want to work in an area where they have their older generation, especially fathers and uncles, looking over their shoulder. And services was an area where the next gen were the masters. The older generation did not have as much knowledge as the next gen. And it just became what we call a win-win strategy. The next gen was happy to diversify or set up new businesses focusing on services. The older generation focused more on manufacturing, continued to provide the money that was required, the funding that was required to set up services.
Okay, very good. Sonu, thank you. We'll continue the conversation, but let's first listen to Saugata next. Professor Saugadari.
Thank you, Professor Ram, and also for a nice answer by Mr. Mohan Reddy and Sonu. I just want to add a couple of things already what others have said. There are, I would say, two stages in the 30 years in terms of evolution, how the family businesses have shifted to services or entered into services. One is, as the earlier speaker has spoken about, that in the early stage of 1990-91, when the liberalization opened up, at that stage, if you recollect, that the entrepreneurial pool in India was very shallow in those days. And it was primarily the entrepreneurial pool was limited to the family businesses in those days because the professionally people, educated people for generations, for varieties of reasons, shunned away from, say, starting businesses. And you know the license Raj, permit Raj, and also the political capital, other capital was much more needed in those days. But post-liberalization, that opportunities emerged. So there are certain professional people like Mohan actually entered the businesses and primarily they chose services industries to do that. But if you look at even those early years, early years of liberalization, where services were opening up, those industries are also very capital intensive, whether it is telecom, whether it is airlines, etc. And there, the natural advantage was there with the family business, and particularly large family businesses. But as Sonu was mentioning, as the time passed by, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, there are many emerging services industries areas are there, where you find that there are not only professionals have entered, but even the next generations of the families who entered to establish their mark, their identity, their signature away from family business or their traditional family businesses. So that's one at a macro level. We see a trend that is more happening, because why? There's shift that is happening in the families from manufacturing to services. But when you come to the micro level, families making choices in terms of moving from manufacturing to services, there are certain, I will say, economic reason, which is also very much prevalent. One is, of course, most of these services industries were actually at the early stage of its industry life cycle in India compared to manufacturing. So as a result, there is a greater opportunities. It is easier to enter, first of all. The entry barriers are low. Once the economy opened up, the regulations were opened up, or it was allowed to enter, so entry barriers are low. The second was the opportunity to grow fast and also make substantive profit. As Mohan was mentioning, the services industries in this period actually given much higher profit margin than the manufacturing. So therefore, it was economically more lucrative to be in this business. Second thing that also happened, if you look at that, when the economy opened up and these many industries were allowed to be entered, for foreign participation or foreign firms are allowed to enter, but many of these industries, they had caps on foreign investment or foreign equity participation, and they needed domestic allies to enter. And in that context, it was the family businesses which had established presence, both political capital and also the experience capital to run businesses in this economy. They were the natural partners. So all these, say, businesses, the telecom, airlines, etc., insurance, you see that foreign companies are actually gone to the family businesses for partnership. And third aspect, which is very critical and is particularly relevant, was that if you look at the India's participation in the global economy, by that time, the 1991, India opened up and started participating in global economy in a significant way. The manufacturing industry globally was much more global, and there are entrenched players from East Asian economies and including China who had taken a pole position in the globalization of the value chain of the manufacturing economy. Whereas in the services of the globalization of the services economy, you would see that it was open field. It was all in the early stage of globalization of services. And many of the Indian entrepreneurs, and as many of the entrepreneurs were actually from families into the services, they could have an opportunity to participate in the global services value chain. Some of the entrepreneurs like Mohan, who had started in the first generation, they could. But if you look at many of the other services industries, particularly which are in globalized in nature, actually it is a family enterprises like Wipros, like Mahindras, Tatas, they actually significantly participated in that.
Hi, Saugata. Hello. Have we lost him? Yeah. I think something has gone wrong with his system. Yeah. So I think I will continue. We'll.
Yeah. So I was dropped off.
So we lost you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible now?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And then there was that unmute. I was not allowed to unmute. Yeah. Okay. So now I think I've finished. By the time I went out, I was almost finished. That the ability to participate in the global value chain and services industry was another motivation, because that was the biggest profit earner for the services businesses.
Okay. So thank you, Saugata. Very interesting points. And let me continue the conversation on this. I think one of the essential interesting points that you mentioned is that there were different waves at different points in time, what kind of industries, what kind of people came. And the same thing was, I think, reflected by Sonu also when she said about the 2000 period, when the IT industry, Y2K and all. So we find that 30 years is not one period, but there are different components of it. And one of the other things I found was that there was sort of right through, there was sort of a demonstration effect of different components and influencing the others. Okay, so if I look at from two angles, one is from the firm family business angle, the other is from the external angle. Of course, the external environment changed, the regulations changed, and that the access to the global market, technology changed, licensing changed, new investments came, funding came, and that's one part of it. But if I look at, as a student, the family business, what I look at it is that what is the resource pool or the resources and resource basket families have? So that consists of a variety of things. One is that they have a lot of experience of building variety of businesses. Even if it is small to medium to large, multiple different businesses, that experience is phenomenal. And that comes as a natural support mechanism for them to enter into new areas. And as Mohan said, the risk management part of it is very crucial. They are able to manage the risk of transition from one sector to another sector much more easily. And yet another thing is that, especially for a fairly established kind of firm, it is easier to attract talent compared to a startup venture. And that too, in the new area, it is much easier compared to a traditional area. For traditional manufacturing to services, it is much easier. Okay, and yet another thing is that the new generation members, and Sonu mentioned this, the next generation family members came with new exposure, new ideas and all. So the family resource pool, resources and capabilities pool got enriched regularly, constantly, and they were ready to tap new opportunities, and the new opportunities came. So my question before we move to the next point is, do you see which one drove what? Or it happened suddenly or not? Or at different points in time, is there any pattern? Mohan, can you just reflect over and see whether there is any pattern you have seen in terms of whether the families and entrepreneurs driving this and tapping, creating new opportunities, or the new opportunities were emerging and the families and entrepreneurs went and exploited them? What do you think?
My belief, Ramu, is that, and I should make a disclosure, my exposure is largely limited to IT services. I have to confess that. But it was a combination of both of them. That is, it's both were at play. People were looking at an opportunity that was not there. Even the family businesses, which probably had a fairly large amount of wealth with them, money with them, were also being bottled up because of this license Raj. And once the liberalization came in, they also opened up their mind to say, are there opportunities? And simultaneously, once actually, if you go back into history, not that I won't spend too much time there, is that even to travel abroad at one point of time, we used to get a permission from RBI. So that was the situation that was there. That went on for a while till liberalization happened. So I think our exposure to the global world itself was very limited. But once the next generation families came in and they went into the best of universities for gaining their knowledge and so on and so forth, they also saw there was a larger pool of people who were saying, yeah, there are other opportunities which have come in. So it was actually at a good intersection that happened. That is, the good old family businesses of India were trying to say, look, we need to get some more opportunities. The next generation family came in, saw those opportunities. It's a combination of both of them, which I think has worked to where it is today. But I have one thing to raise in connection with this, is that we've only looked at the success of family businesses today in terms of what percentages are there, etc. But you also have to look at how many have failed so far. Because I also know of number of instances where family businesses they thought they had money. They thought it was very easy. And they also had, for example, there were companies which had their IT services business within the group. They spun out the IT services business saying that, this will be the new company. Never made it. So therefore, it was not very easy for family businesses too, unless they understood the various business models from time to time, had a great appreciation for technology. And I think, it was much, much different. If you look at these, again, the success of IT services, it was also led by exports. It's not domestic centric business. Whereas manufacturing today, IT services I'm referring to, I'm not referring to your global services in general as a definition. I'm limiting my exposure to IT services. It's all export business. Customer centricity is very high to the extent we're finding it difficult for these IT services guys to work in manufacturing. Go back to the customer, because he thinks that, customer is so important. Whereas in manufacturing with the lower margin, he's also important. I don't dispute that. But with lower margins, he can't have the same flexibility as an IT services guy has. So therefore, one has to keep in mind that, all this happened because of number of dynamics, and both the dynamics you talked about, whether it was family businesses feeling that they were bottled up, or the opportunities that coming in because of the next generation was there, were a combination of them made family businesses successful in services.
Hi, Saugata.
Yeah. No, see,
respond to Mohan. Very
point. I would like to point out, because as started by Mohan, that family businesses are not homogeneous. They have a lot of heterogeneity. And one heterogeneity, of course, is that what is what you pointed out earlier, the leadership talent pool the families have. So there are families who are large families, who have multi-generational families where they have a large pool of leadership. And then there are families which are nuclear in nature. They may not have a large pool of families. So given that, if you have a larger pool of, and many of the family businesses which actually are diversified, not only just for in the services or manufacturing as well, you'll see that multi-generational, their aspiration to satisfy that, to match with the opportunities that were emerging in the marketplace, particularly on the more sophisticated services businesses, they found a perfect match. And many of those new generation family leaders actually gravitated towards starting services businesses. So that's one interesting part of it. And as a result, you see that, and there was a significant diversification that happened in some of those families. But there are more nuclear families where we see that the diversification was not much. Some of them might have diversified from manufacturing to services, but they stuck to that services business and made it world-class or made it larger, stronger, bigger. Here, I would like to briefly touch upon what Mohan just mentioned about the relative performance of family businesses within this period, not only just services or manufacturing. In fact, we did a study in ISB, we published a white paper a few years ago on actually looking at the performance of all family businesses vis-a-vis all other kinds of businesses. And Mohan, you are absolutely right that we find that significant performance problems with family businesses in general. There are rising stars, there are great performers, but there are a large number of people or family businesses also failure on that. But in the services business also, you will see that kind of variation that exists. But coming back to the motivational question that Professor was asking, I find that the family dynamics is in terms of, and the resource pool in terms of leadership is also an important indicator why some of these families are actually diversified in multiple businesses.
Okay, thank you. Let me move on to the next question, but because we have some constraints of time, it's becoming interesting. So let me ask this, start with Sonu. What have been the one of the sectors that has grown, phenomenally well is the financial services sector. So what have been the enablers of the rapid growth of financial services sector, including NBFCs and others during this period, especially the family control? There are quite a few family controlled financial services business. So what do you think? I mean, you have a strong banking background, finance background. I thought you would be the best person to tell us. What do you think? Sonu.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for unmuting me. So Ram, it is true that a lot of the financial services companies are dominated by family businesses. One thing that comes up in when I look and when I talk with people is that before the late 60s and even pre-independence and just after independence, financial services were all family owned. If you look at Bharat Bank, example, that was something that R.K. Dalmia had. There was Bharat Insurance that R.K. Dalmia had. The Tatas had a significant holding in, I think, what is now Central Bank of India. Aviation was Tata Airlines. It's just that somewhere in the middle, almost all of these got nationalized, and even if the families wanted to explore their entrepreneurial skills in the financial services, they did not have opportunities. What happened after liberalization was that there were opportunities. I mean, new mutual fund were allowed to be set up. Life insurance companies, private life insurance companies came in. New banks were given licenses. NBFCs were allowed to be set up. Combine this with this bunch of young people who had come back with education from the best institutes around the world, including India. And here is, it is also my belief that the mindset that is required for manufacturing is very different from the mindset that is required for excelling in services. So I think it was just that everything came together mid-90s onwards. There were these pool of talented youngsters from family businesses with the right education, with the right worldview, and most importantly, having seen around the world what were the possibilities. The new regulations made it possible for private sector to come in. One thing that is often seen as a negative for family businesses is that decision making is centralized. I actually see it as an advantage in a lot of times, because decision making is very fast. If the family decides that there is an area that they need to get into, the decision making, and therefore then the implementation is very fast. And family business owners are some of the smartest people that I've met. And if they saw an opportunity where they saw themselves making a mark for themselves and also for the business, they went in, head first. And that's how, in the financial services sector, we saw this huge interest from family businesses. And if you see, a lot of them were people who already had a lot of money available from their other manufacturing industries. Have I answered your question?
Yes. And let me just build on that. That's very interesting, because historically we have had a very strong financial banking sector. And what I notice also is that there are three kinds of changes happening, especially in the past 91 period. One is that several of the manufacturing companies started exploring the financial area, I mean, including Cholamandalam Finance of or the Bajaj Finance or the Tata Finance kind of companies. Variety of family businesses started diversifying from their core manufacturing to service business. And within service also, the many of them moved into banking related, maybe because they understood finance a little better than, as Mohan said, technology or even the export-led IT kind of businesses or new businesses which are not known to them, which they are not familiar with. And family businesses did not want to venture into a completely unknown territory. So that is one. The second is that some of the traditional finance companies started diversifying what we call as related diversification. So into other areas of finance. So if you are into one segment of the market, move into other segments of it. A third thing that happened was that a large number of small finance companies, including the local finance companies, including, I would say, the chit funds. So many of them became big. I mean, for instance, the Muthoot Finance kind of companies were all small companies limited to certain regions. They become really, really large. And their segments are completely different from the segments of a auto finance company. So as the economy expanded, as the new opportunities came, many of them moved into a variety of these segments. So is there any, I mean, I want to listen to Sonu and the others also. So do you see any pattern in this kind of a change? If I bring in, let me just ask Sarukada because he spoke about the wave pattern, so 91 to 2000 to 2010, or I mean, if I put it into 10-year blocks, somewhere there, and then the hospitality coming in and growing, telecom coming and growing. So is there any pattern you have seen in your studies about this kind of growth? So,
yes, if I, my wonderful question and an observation. To look at for many of the traditional manufacturing large family business groups, actually getting into this NBFCs and those kind of things are natural extension because they, like say Reliance Capital, the kind of funding that were required for their to satisfy their growth venture, they needed certain support actually to facilitate that. And the market for such funding were not very, I'll say, easily available. So they thought that it is better to create their own arm, like Reliance Capital or let's say Bajaj Finance, etc., to fulfill that void in the institutional void, as we call it, and benefit from there. So it was not that they were getting into the financial services as to become a financial conglomerate. It was more to expand their basic core interest of manufacturing and support that. And that has been one of the major things that you would see, whether it's Bajaj Finance, etc. But as we were discussing earlier, that some of the new generation family people, they were the family leaders, they saw a big opportunity in this and actually accelerated and make it a business by itself. What we see in today's context when the next generation took over from Rahul Bajaj to Sanjeev and Rajiv, what we see that there is a clear separation and Sanjeev has become the face, as Mohan was mentioning, the face of the financial businesses. So you could see that the trigger might be to expand their own inherent age-old family businesses. But over a period of time, when this business become more profitable and big, you clearly see that the demarcation is happening. The other feature was, which Sonu was mentioning, is not related to the established family businesses, but it was boutique family firms, which were actually operating in the financial market, which is at a rudimentary stage in the 70s and a part of 80s, which suddenly grew rapidly, particularly on the stockbroking, equity research, and all merchant banking and things like that. And you see the proliferation of many of those family businesses, which are boutique, suddenly actually been able to scale up. And even some of them had become world-class to participate in the global financial markets. So there is another stream of family entrepreneurs who are not big entrepreneurs to begin with, but has become significantly big and multi-generational in this period. And typically, you are seeing this on those investment trading, advisory, mutual fund, market analyst, and those kind of areas, which also actually gave, as Sonu was mentioning, for many of the globally trained or very educated family people, say next generation, they find the natural home into those kind of businesses, which are more white collar in nature. And they saw that how those businesses can be extremely profitable in the global market based on their exposure and experience.
Yeah, I mean, talking about finance, another natural question coming to my mind, especially because financial services are so important backbone of the economy. It has grown so much. All established existing companies, new entrants, everybody has come. But of late, one of the major areas of concern is about governance, quality of governance. And we have seen multiple companies holding up the economy per se has been affected very badly in the kind of events that happened in the past 2 years. So I know that Mohan is very active in the CII and other industry association, although he is not from the financial services sector. As an outside observer, what do you think? Do you find any difference in terms of the governance practices of family-controlled financial services business and non-family controlled? Let me also refer this to the earlier event, the Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers originally was a family-controlled business until if I remember right, the past 20 years or so. So that is when the family withdrew or family's role was redefined, and the non-family leadership came. They had a very active board and all. And you know what happened to the company. So is there anything that is particularly important from a governance angle for family versus non-family businesses? Mohan, what do you think?
Ramu, thank you. A good question. I'm very passionate about it. Family or non-family, I think what's very important for organizations are their values. And if you don't have values in an organization, it doesn't matter. It can come from family, it can be a professional organization too. So therefore, I think what we all have to recognize at this point of time, I keep saying, if it is your own business, you can do what you like. Because I also work with a number of startups. And I keep saying the moment you touch a rupee or a lakh of rupees or crore rupees, irrespective of what it is, it's not your business any longer. You're a custodian of public wealth. You have to definitely say, I'm responsible for it. I can't do what I like. But the more important one is, I think we also have a big challenge in this country because of the legal system too that goes by. Lehman Brothers, or there are so many examples in the West, people have earned on governance and immediately there was action. They all got penalized, going to jail for a number of years. We also know an instance in IT industry itself, where money was swindled to an extent of billions of dollars. Nothing happened thereafter. It's now 10 years old. It's still not even reached the smallest and lowest of the courts. So therefore, I think what is required is all of us have to understand it's not family, non-family. Values become important. And I keep talking also intensely about this thing called greed and fear. You see, greed and fear were also born along with mankind. But the point is that unless you say that, I fear the law, I fear the society, I fear God, whatever it is, then, everything is in semblance. The moment you start saying, I don't fear anything and my greed overtakes and I become more and more greedy, that's when you get into imbalanced situations. So therefore, point I like to make is family and non-family is not important. What's important is values are more important.
Very good. So I'm going to move on. Again, I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Okay. So see, if we look at I'm looking at the post-COVID period. Newport closed our presentation with the next 30 years or something like that, whether it is 30 years or 20 years or not. So if we look back, so family businesses responded very entrepreneurially in 91, post-91, past several years, restructuring themselves, remixing their resource basket, and adding and deleting many things. So they were very, very flexible in terms of responding to that. Even that Bombay Club response to what happened to all the companies, that's a different, very, very interesting. So in the current challenge scenario of challenges, I mean, we are having a big tsunami. This COVID is a big tsunami. So what are the challenges of transition family businesses face in the post-COVID? Post-COVID and digital era. Digital revolution was happening. I would say that my observation is that COVID has actually accelerated that. It was all going to happen. Okay. So how are they responding, or how are they likely to respond, or how should they respond? So what do you see? Let me start with you, Mohan. And then I will ask the others.
Sure. Thank you, Ramu. Thanks for the question. I think what we are seeing for sure is that there is enormous amount of digital transformation that's happening to all businesses, including the family businesses. And the response has to be in terms of agility, our ability to move very quickly, very swiftly to this current situation. Because Nupur was talking about next 30 years. Nupur, I don't know what will happen in the next 3 years. Forget about 30 years. So I keep saying, you know, we all coined this new word called there is a new normal that's going to come by. I keep saying no. I think the other word I now have is never normal. Because every day there is a new surprise that comes in. And not only COVID, I think, you know, COVID is one aspect of life. The other aspect of life you're seeing is this big technology shifts that are occurring. And they will definitely change the face of industries. Not many people ever thought about, you know, agriculture will use drones. Now that is a good application, precision agriculture as it's called. Or the amount of technology that will go into hospitals, for instance. So therefore, the key thing that I'm saying is that people who are very agile, who will preserve their cash, there are some very hard decisions that have to be taken. And those decisions are to be taken at this point of time because of the larger interest of longevity of organizations. And these will continuously come up. If, you know, somebody thinks that laying off people is a sin, I'm saying, boss, you're committing a bigger sin by putting at risk the other 9 jobs. If you're saying that you've got 10 jobs in front of you, 1 job is what you probably want to get off. But if you're saving 9 jobs as a result of that, but if you want to keep all the 10, and then as a result of that, what I think will become very important as we move forward is companies will become very light, can swiftly move towards the new normal that will come by every year or every 6 months. I don't know how quickly it is.
Very good. So let me listen to Sonu.
No, she's muted.
So I think she has been muted.
Now, yeah, you know, this is like somebody's delight to mute all the women, you know. I'm just joking. You know, so let me look at or talk a little about the post-COVID world in a slightly different manner. I think COVID has been a great leveler for everybody. It doesn't matter how much of money you had. It didn't matter how big a house you lived in. Everybody is stalked by the same virus. There is no guarantee that if you're rich or powerful, you will not succumb to the virus. So what this has also done is that it has suddenly made the powerful patriarchs, the powerful business owners suddenly look at mortality in a very, very real sense. I think Mohan talked about greed and fear. I think this fear of death has become suddenly very, very real. And as a result, you know, people who thought that they were immortal have had to look at mortality with a new set of eyes. Coupled with that is the other phenomena, which is a result of COVID, that families have ended up spending enormous amount of time together. I don't think any time in the past 30 years or 50 years, the entire family spent so much of time together. There was no place for them to walk out or go away. They had to find they had to find place for each other in the family. And as we all know that a lot of the issues in families arise out of lack of communication or miscommunication. I think this lockdown period has given families no choice but to communicate better. I mean, how much of Netflix can you watch? How much of HBO can you watch? You have to sit down and talk. And you do talk about businesses. And it is, again, my hypothesis, it is my belief that the generations have renegotiated their place within the family during this lockdown period. And it is, again, my hypothesis that going forward, there is going to be a lot more collaboration, not only between the family members, but also between businesses, because people have realized that, you cannot, what is that? Ekla chalo re, you cannot actually do that. You do need everyone around. COVID will also throw up, again, a huge number of opportunities. There will be a lot of businesses that will shut down. There will be a lot of, industries or businesses that will not be able to propagate. But at the same time, there will be a lot more businesses that will keep evolving because of digitalization, because of new consumer habits, because of the new way of doing business. That's what I think.
Okay, very good. Sogita, you have any last thought in 1 minute? Hello.
To unmute.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. So what Mohan has said, I believe that basically the new elephant in the room is the digital economy, which is the new generation technologies which are there. And COVID has actually accelerated that process, which was supposed to come maybe 3 to 5 years later, is right there. And under some circumstances, I want to just to add to this two panelists what they said, something at a different dimension, following from what we are discussing earlier, that actually the family businesses are in this situation are going to face a very different kind of future than what they faced in the 1990-91 when economy was liberalized. This is the first time the family businesses are going to face a huge set of competition from the entrepreneurial talent pool that has been created in India in the last 10 years and particularly in the last 5 years, who have no family, say, privileges or family business tie-ups earlier. They're all new generation entrepreneurs, professionals, young kids who have burst into the scene. So the entrepreneurial talent pool in India is actually busting. And that's the talent pool, that's the entrepreneurial pool which are going to give very, very tough competition to the family businesses. And I call this is an IPL moment of Indian economy and business. What happened to IPL, if you remember in 2007 when IPL started, many of the mega stars suddenly found foundering, and there are many new young cricketers came from different small towns and B-class, C-class cities, and they burst into the scene. And last 12, 15 years, you see that they were actually dominating the Indian cricket scene. That was the kind of prognosis that I have about what is going to happen in Indian entrepreneurial, say, market. And that's why the family businesses have to really transform themselves, because the way whether Sonu says that the traditional way of decision making in the family is centralized, etc., was very useful. But I particularly believe that has to be given away. The new generations have to be given much more opportunities to express themselves, to experiment, because they have the wherewithal actually to go out and make a difference in these new generations of businesses, or even transforming the existing businesses with new generation of technologies. But they need to have a greater say in the decision making, and then only these family enterprises or family businesses will continue to dominate in the coming decades.
Okay, thank you. It has been excellent. So I won't take much time. We have time for a few questions, but I just want to close this. I find that the last point, particularly Mohan emphasized on the agility part of it, understanding that the realism is that things are going to be very, very dynamic. And others also mentioned that not to take things for granted. And Sonu also mentioned about the need for communication. But my final point is that we need to have very strong decision-making processes and policies in the family, which again goes back to what Mohan earlier said is about the governance part. Family governance is important, business governance is important, whatever business it is. These are two important things, then only we'll have family harmony and business prosperity. I mean, whether it is 3 years, 30 years, or any number of years. So over to you, Nupur, for a few questions.
Yes, thank you, Professor Ram. And the panel discussion was indeed extremely insightful. We have a lot of good comments in the chat box and a lot of questions, but I'm just going to ask one question to each panelist, kind of clubbing the questions together so that we get as much as possible from the panelists. So, Mr. Mohan, the first question is to you. There are a lot of questions around, are the family businesses ready to take the plunge into newer technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on? And clubbed with that, there is this one question that if you were to start a business now, in what sector would it be? So two questions really. What business would you set up now? Just like in 1991, you started Scient or Infotech. And are the family businesses ready to plunge into the high-end technology that seems to be the need of the hour now?
Sure. Let me take the first question first. Are family businesses ready to take plunge into newer businesses? I think the answer is it depends upon how the families are appreciating the impact of the new wave of technologies that are coming in. I like to paraphrase with one thing there is that age does not matter. We're seeing senior members of the family trying to push youngsters in the family saying that take the plunge, there are new opportunities that are coming in. So no reflection on my family for sure. I'm talking about several other families that I know. So please, not also is not a reflection of my age. I'm saying generally, don't get next generation. Are they the Gen Z is more savvy technology? No, I know elderly people who are also equally good in technology, appreciating technology. The second question that you asked is where will I take a plunge? I'm very upbeat in terms of technology. And this digital transformation, I think it will definitely change the complexion of the world. Look at even healthcare, for instance. A country like India, where we have shortage of doctors, technology will assist the doctor. I'm not saying it will replace the doctor for sure. Healthcare, use of technology will certainly change the complex of the face of healthcare in this country. Even for that matter, education. We have one other big row saying that the quality of education is very poor in this country because the quality of teachers are poor. True. But today, if you see the intervention of technology that's coming in, with AI running at the back end, we are seeing that the AI can then set in the individual learning paths for people. So where will I plunge myself into? Is purely in technology, technology, and technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan. The next question I have is for Professor Saugata. So there are a few questions around the performance of family firms in the service business. So there's a question that says that the non-family firms perform better in industries like utilities and basically manufacturing wherever the non-family firms are present. What can family firms do to become competitive in manufacturing, and what can they do to maintain their edge in services?
Okay, so if you look at Nupur, how some of the successful families have been able to navigate this is that they have formed a structural mechanism called business groups. So business group is a mechanism by which what they did, they allowed the professionals to run the business without losing the strategic control of it. So this is something that whether you are diversifying into multiple manufacturing businesses or manufacturing services combination, or doing primarily becoming a service conglomerates. But those families would like to actually continue to perform better. In fact, being able to navigate in this say tumultuous time, both COVID and as well as digital transformation, is to actually induct more professionals and give them the opportunity to run their businesses. But at the same time, they can keep the strategic control of the businesses through a structural mechanism called business group. But at the same time, as Mohan was mentioning, Professor Ram was mentioning earlier, there is a greater emphasis that will be needed to actually restructure their governance mechanisms so that as a family, they can continue to perpetuate the values and have a better governance structure on that, so that the professionals can run those businesses in a market mode, create value, but without losing track of what actually the family's socio-emotional wealth is.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Saugata. Sonu, you have worked a lot with the next gen and family businesses, and this question is for you from one of our participants. They ask that operating in different businesses is fine, but being world-class is different from operating in the world. What is the next generation doing to make Indian family businesses world-class?
To be world-class, rather than just be operating in the world, you need to know what you are up against. The new gen actually knows what they are up against, because their worldview is very different from that of their forebears. So they know what they're up against. They know what has to be done to create world-class organizations. They are not afraid to collaborate. They are not afraid to bring in talented non-family members to come and run their businesses. One of the key conflicts between next gen and so I call them the inheritors and the patriarchs. One of the key areas of conflict is their view around talented professionals. The patriarchs see it as a needless expense, and the inheritors see it as an investment that is a must with a capital M if they want to build world-class businesses. The next gen is also more open to getting in strategic partners. They know what they know and they know what they don't know, and they're not afraid to bring in external partners to fill in the gaps of the knowledge. So when you say what is required, I think the next gen already know what is required. Till now, they were kind of constrained because of the fact that the patriarchs were unwilling to let go. I think the COVID, the first lockdown, which was a stringent lockdown, actually has helped. And this is anecdotal evidence I have. I don't have any empirical data. But anecdotally, I do know that the patriarchs are now more open to let go and let the next gen follow what they want to do in terms of the gaps that need to be filled to create world-class organizations.
Right. Thank you, Sonu. Professor Ram, I'll end the Q&A session with you because there are quite a number of questions. It's kind of an extension of Sonu's reply as well. There are quite a lot of questions around professionalization. So some of the people are asking, is there any evidence that professionalized family firms perform better than those which are controlled as well as managed by family firms, controlled as well as managed by family members? Then there are questions around, is it necessary to bring professionals? If there are enough family members available, so why should you professionalize?
Let me clear this sort of a misnomer or a myth. Very often when I got into the family business area, many people used to say that family and professional. I don't believe that. I believe that any business has to be run professionally. whether it is run, managed by a family professional or a non-family professional, depends on the capabilities required, depends on the education, knowledge, skills required for that kind of a business. Okay, so therefore, I mean, if I take, for instance, very briefly, the Apollo Group, but for Dr. Pratap Reddy, his four daughters are not medical people. It's a highly professionally managed family business. All the four of them run it or manage that as professionals. So what is required is professional management, and professionalization or professionalism means that you do the best thing for the business. You have a dispassionate approach. You keep family separate from the business and do whatever is good for the business, do it. So if you are doing the right thing at the right time, it may be about strategy, it may be about organizational structure, it may be about jobs, roles, rewards, anything, then your business will do better. If you don't do that, if you suboptimize that, if you compromise that by bringing in, keeping businesses and employment exchange for the family, then naturally the business will be affected, performance will come down. And there is enough evidence to show that. I don't have anything to quote immediately, but there is enough evidence to show that businesses which are run better, including family controlled, family owned or family controlled businesses, whether those are managed at the operating level or at the strategy level by the family. If this distinction is very clear, then the businesses will function or do better. If these are not followed, whether it is family member, non-family member, we have enough cases of non-family businesses failing because the managers are not professionals. They may be qualified, but they don't run it professionally. I think that's where the crux of the matter lies. I stop there. Thank you, ma'am.
Right. Thank you, Professor Ram. That was a very powerful thing to say at the end of the webinar. Just to very quickly, in 50 seconds, Mr. Mohan, would you want to add something?
No.
Okay.
Please
so
go ahead.
To very quickly sum up the webinar, it's very difficult to sum it up because there were so many points which came up, but clearly there are a lot of demographic and social changes that are happening, and the next generation is playing a very key role in taking these services and digital economy forward. It is customer centricity which will define the growth of family firms in the future. So to be world class, to compete in the coming years, it is important to be agile. Cash remains the king, and institutional voids, family business group firms, they kind of organized themselves in a way, and they took opportunities which were available in a way that it also acted to fill in the institutional voids that existed at a point of time, and it may also play a very important role in the coming future, in the coming days. Again, in situations like the COVID situation, communication starts to improve in certain cases, which has played a very important role traditionally in the performance of family firms. So some of these points came across very strongly in the panel discussion. We have very good feedback coming in from the participants. So thank you very much. I hand over to Nandil to formally close the webinar. We are sorry, we're not taking any questions anymore. We are running out of time. So Nandil, over to you.
Thank you, Nupur. That was a very enlightening discussion and well summed up by you. Firstly, I would just like to begin by thanking our panelists today, Mr. Mohan Reddy, Ms. Sonu Bhasin, and Professor Saugata Ray, who agreed to be on the panel with us today. I would also like to thank the ISB, IT, and AV support team for their help today with everything going remote due to COVID and the video call being very smooth. We would also like to thank the Marketing and Communications Department of ISB and the External Affairs team, MFAB, Public Policy, and the Alumni departments who have helped us reach the right audience for this webinar. And we have been able to have such a resounding participation. We would also like to thank the members of the press who have joined us today. And lastly, a very big thank you to the team at Thomas Medhiny Center for Family Enterprise, who have supported us during the development of this study and the presentation of the findings as well. With this, we conclude our webinar today. I would like to thank everyone who has taken out time to attend this session. I hope that all the participants of the webinar found it to be interesting and thought-provoking. Participants may log off now as we will close the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nandu. Thank you, Ramu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks to all
everybody.
the people who were there in the
Thank
panel.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ram. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohan.
Thank you, Ram.
Bye, Mohan.
Everybody.
Lovely meeting you. Bye, Saugata, Nandil, everybody. Bye.
We'll touch base. You stay safe.
Yeah, nice.
Everybody stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.